Okay, so I've got my worksheet set up here for one trial. I'm going to show you how to work the data for that one trial, and then I'm going to just show you how to place a second trial in the same graph with some data I just kind of made up quickly. So here's something that I actually did one time, and I've got the starting molarity of the hydrogen peroxide is 0.704 molar. The reaction volume in this case was only 25 milliliters, and so I got it as 0.025 liters. And then one of the first things I want to do then is get the starting moles of hydrogen peroxide. Well, if you recall, molarity is moles per liter. So all I have to do here is rearrange that equation, and moles equals liters times molarity. So I'm going to do equals liters times molarity. And I've got my starting moles here. I've got put the chemical reaction right here. Don't really need it for anything, just for reference. So then the rest of what I have is my time data listed here, and then maybe some scale readings that I took. Now, of course, you might have more readings than this, but this is, let's say, what I have right now. First thing I want to get is the mass loss. And of course, the mass loss is just going to be like whatever's in this column subtracted from this starting value. So equals the 20.84. I want to lock this cell because I'm going to do some fill downs, and that's never going to change. I want to always reference that cell, so I can put dollar signs in this B5, or I can just press the F4 button, does it for me. Subtract, and then I'm going to do that cell again, but I'm going to leave this one unlocked because then I'll fill down and it'll all change. So if I hit enter, of course this one's 0, and I'm just going to fill down, and now I've got the mass loss figured out. The moles of oxygen produced. Well, I'm going to assume that the mass loss from the flask was moles of oxygen that were produced, or grams of oxygen produced. I have it in mass right now. If I want to change it into moles, I can just divide it by the molar mass of oxygen. So this is going to equal whatever the mass of oxygen produced was, divided by the molar mass of oxygen, which is 32 grams per mole. And I can fill that one down. And I've got those values. Well, using the balanced chemical equation, now that I've got moles of oxygen produced, for every mole of oxygen I produce, I must have used up 2 moles of hydrogen peroxide. So this column here is just going to equal 2 times the second column right there. And I can fill that down. So at each time point, that's how many moles of hydrogen peroxide I have used up. If I want to know how much is remaining in the flask, well, this is how much I started with. And this is how much has been used up at every single time point. So really, I'm just going to start with this value and subtract all of these numbers at every time point. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this cell equal to this reference point. But when I do the fill down, again, I want to make sure I have that cell locked. So I could use F4 to put my dollar signs in to lock it. And I'm going to subtract off however many moles that I have used up. And of course at times 0 I haven't used anything, so I have the same value. And as I fill down, now I place that into moles of hydrogen peroxide that are left in the flask. And if I just want to change it to the molarity now, well, I've got moles here, and my reaction volume didn't really change. It was roughly 25 milliliters each time. So molarity is moles divided by liters. Let's do equals the moles here, divided by the liters here. I'm going to have to lock that D1 cell, so I'll hit F4, enter, and I can fill this down. And now I've got my data, molarity versus time. And I can actually use this template for any other trial. I could cut and paste this, make sure I change my values accordingly, like my liters and stuff like that, my time points, my mass points, everything else should be referenced, and it probably does it for you right away. Now if I want to make a graph, I'm going to insert, scatter. I like this one here with the dots. And there's the little graph that it wants me to put stuff on. Remember, if I click off the graph, I don't see a tabs here. But once I click on it, Chart Tools appears. And under the Design tab on Chart Tools, I go to Select Data. I'm going to add. I'm going to call this Trial 1, or maybe I would call it Starting Trial or something like that. I want to plot hydrogen peroxide versus time. So time is going to be on the bottom, the X values. I'll highlight those, making sure I don't highlight the seconds. And I'm going to put my peroxide values on the y-axis. And I have that one set on there. I might want to clean this thing up a little bit. I like to get rid of the grid lines. Looks like my lowest point goes down to about 0.5 here. So I'm going to left click down my my y-axis and right click on it. I'm going to format this axis, and I want to put my minimum value to be about 0.5. And so that makes it maybe a little bit better of a graph. I'm going to stretch this just a little bit. If I wanted to, I could maybe, it's good to have the points there. I want to make sure that I put some axes labels on there, so while this is highlighted, I believe it's under layout, axis titles, and I can go ahead and put in my axis titles that way. This is something we have done before. Oops, I should probably do this. Didn't exactly make that look real nice. And this let's see. I'm going to make that subscript. If I just highlight the two and I right click on it, I can go to font and make them subscript. Okay, so I've got the hydrogen peroxide concentration versus time. And I can subsequently add more stuff. Now this chart's not very big, and for purpose of this video, I'm not going to resize that at all. You may need to resize it when you're all said and done. Remember, make your graph look nice. Make sure that when someone takes a step back from it, that they can really tell what's going on. That's the big deal here with the graph. So now that we've got that, I'm actually going to just slide some of this fake data I made up. Let's say I go through this whole second trial, and this is what I end up getting. So basically, this is my time points, let's say, that are right here. And I go through all of these calculations, and under this column, I guess it would have been, are my molarities versus time. Okay, so I want to put that on the graph as well. Now I've already got a graph made. It's very easy to do. I can left click on this, or somehow bring up that design tab again and go to select data. There's my first set of data. I'm just going to add a second set. Let's say this one is half volume, same concentration, or something like that. My X values here are the time points I took. The Y values would be this. Hit OK. And now I've got that second line on there, and I can move this over here if I want. If you think it helps your data, you can clean up these points a little bit. Remember to left click on those, and I could format the data series, and I could sit there and play with the marker or the fill or the color or however I want to do that and make it look a little bit nicer.